They're just attacking every day, and essentially it loses quite a lot of battles, but in reality the South just simply runs out of men and resources and the North just swamps it, and that's pretty much how the ending comes. Now we can see this a little bit in the men on the field.
Someone's got glasses.
If we go over to the Union ranks, we can see very clearly that there's a great deal of regularity. The enlisted man's trousers are these blue trousers. Most of the troops are dressed in blue. I'll come to the ones that aren't in a minute. And you'll see a variety of uniforms. I've got a shell jacket on, that's a pre-war militia one. There's a gentleman here in a frock coat with a hardy hat. But during the war, the Union Army was given a 4-button sack coat. And this is the coat that they're supposed to do their fatigues in. They're supposed to, they're supposed to do dirty work in and have a fancy uniform for fighting. But anybody who knows anything about soldiers knows what happens next. Of course, they give up these, they send all their fancy uniforms home, and they stay in these forage caps and these 4-button sack coats. And the government doesn't exist, doesn't make a fuss about it. So essentially, the Union soldier becomes more and more uniform as the day goes on. Now, at the beginning of the war, they fought like this, in long rows, face to face, at nominally 150 to 200 yards. Now, we're not going to try and kid you that this is the right distance. This is about half to a third of the right distance. But obviously, if we were doing this at the right distance, you wouldn't get to see everybody. So we have condensed the distance. We have shortened the distance on the battlefield, so you can see these fantastic individuals performing as they will. So that's the Union Army. Over here we have the Confederates. Now normally people talk about the battle between... Volley here? That wasn't a bad volley. When they do a volley really well, it should sound like one shot. But you can see with the Confederates there's less uniformity. When the war started they didn't have a uniform, so they decided to wear the grey cadet uniform. But the cadets on that side were wearing the grey cadet uniform, and some of the soldiers on this side wanted to wear the regular blue uniform. We can all see that problem. So, what happened is they made their own uniform that was brown. It was a deep chestnut brown, but it had homemade dyes. And the homemade dyes faded, and they faded into this colour that's kind of like what we call butternut. You can still see there's some early war grey uniforms in there, but basically the butternut becomes predominant. It's a blend of cotton and wool, so it's not a wool uniform predominantly like the Union are. And as the war grows on and Confederate shortages get more and more and more, these uniforms are becoming shorter and shorter and simpler and simpler. And if anybody wants to go around the camp and look at Confederate uniforms at the end, you'll see by the end, there's no trim on these. These are really basic uniforms. So as the war goes on, the Union infantrymen can expect useful things to fight the war, like ammunition, pay, money, a new pair of boots every 6 months, a new uniform every 3 months, and some leave. The Confederate infantryman is lucky if he gets ammunition. But then we move on to innovation. Now innovation begins to take into effect. See here, in the middle of the battlefield now, to the other flank, we have sharpshooters. Now in the battle between the blue and the grey, which we've actually decided is the battle between the blue and the butternut, we now have green. Who are the sharpshooters? Well, Burdan decided that he wanted a bunch of sharpshooters with Sharp's rifle, hence why they're called sharpshooters.
We have the same idea.
And they would be given the latest Sharp's rifle, a breech-loading rifle capable of 7 rounds a minute. That was accurate, up to 1,000 metres. Now, in reality, you're looking at 500 because of the way that the sights and everything are arrayed and how difficult it is actually to make out a man-sized target out of that range. But they were used to harry the enemy, to take out important people like buglers, commanders, flag bearers, that kind of thing. And then they certainly don't want to be in a pitched battle with line infantry like this.
You can see he's struggling to see. Yeah, I know. Who is?
They would fight in a much more modern way. They would fight in lines like similar to what we do with skirmish order. You'll see nominally that they will be fighting in pods, which is 4 of them in 2 groups of 2. Very similar to modern skirmishers, and in fact this is the beginning of modern skirmishers. The green uniform is the beginning of modern camouflage. So again, there's innovations happening on the Union side. By the end of the war, the Union will have repeating rifles. It will have early Gatling guns. It will have rifled cannons. It will have a whole myriad of brand new types of repeating rifles and breech-loading rifles. Meanwhile, the Confederacy will still be fighting in the war with the same weapons that it started with. But now what we've done is we're going to include artillery into our battle. See, what's happened here is the artillery now has got range on our soldiers. The Union commander has retreated and the Confederates have advanced, but now the cannons have got a clear shot on the Confederacy. Now, if there was one weapon system of the war that didn't improve, it was the cannons, and the reason for that, it was never needed. The 12-pound Napoleon cannon and its little brother, the 6-pounder, were used throughout the war, and they were used throughout the war to great effect. They could fire a projectile at a mile and hit a barn. No American Civil War battle happened at a range over a mile, so the weapon system was more than adequate for every and any battle.
Heads up.
Rifled cannons did exist, and rifled cannons could do things like hit the barn door. The problem was, the rifled cannon couldn't fire the same ammunition types as the smoothbore ones we're looking at there. The smoothbore cannons that we're looking at there could fire a solid shot, which is very useful for going through a fortification or the side of a ship. But it's not very good against massed infantry. So the cannons, and they're bringing a second cannon on now. What do we reckon to this? 2 cannons. So we have a second cannon. The cannons can also fire something called shot. Now shot is a hollow ball full of explosives. And they actually put a fuse on it, which is lit by the cannon going off. And hopefully, if you measure it right, it should explode above your enemy and shatter him down with all the fragments of the casing. Now, an English lieutenant in the Napoleonic Wars took out the explosives, put half of it back, and then filled it back up with musket balls. And he made it twice as effective. And his name will forever be put in the English language because his name was Harvey Shrapnel, and that's where we get the term shrapnel from.
Oh, nice ring.
It looks to me like the Union are firing by file. This is where they fire in one after the other, but it's a suppression tactic.
I was expecting him to go that way.
A couple of other things to point out on our battlefield. Of course, while we're actually firing blanks today, you are seeing how far they jet a flame in air. And even though you can't see the flames in the daylight, you can see the smoke from the flames, so you can see how far the danger's up there. Look, there's a great example. You see the smoke ring, even against the wind, you can see just how far the power from that cannon can extend. So great care must be taken on these battlefields. So we have several safety things in place to stop basically us getting hurt. So we do have some minimum ranges at which we can engage.
Mummy's gonna watch you. Oh, aren't you? Are you okay?
Now the final type of ammunition that our cannon brought with us is a canister. Now canister is essentially a tin full of musket balls. And they put it down the barrel and just use the whole thing as a 4-inch and a 4.5-inch bore shotgun. Very useful for final defence fire in a cannon, which is why you see so few cannon crew with pistols or swords, because it's a double volley.
Good boy.
I'm going to stand back because I'm getting hit with debris.
Did you like that, Carol? Very interesting. Just as you remember it,
I don't know if you can hear it above all the other noise, but one of the problems with the battlefield was communication. We have a bugler on the field and he's just called back the regiment. Because of course the bugle sounds over gunfire. Drum fire didn't do it. Drum didn't do that. Drum would get drowned out by cannons. So Napoleonics had drums and a few bugles. By the time we get to the American Civil War, we kept bugles.
Do you mind?
And before you think that's old-fashioned, the Russians were still using bugles in the Second World War. So it works. That was with tanks, believe it or
Telling her
not.
she can give him back to me whenever she wants. Oh, yeah, he is heavy.
Now that looked to me like a shell that exploded directly above. That was a correctly fused shell. Can we have a cheer for our Union gunners? Wow, they might be changing this. Or maybe you want to cheer for our Confederates who might throw the Union off the field. Oh, I don't know. Which do we want louder? Do we want Union gunners?
Yes!
Or the Confederacy?
No!
Oh, I can see which way this crowd's going. I put the wrong jacket on today, didn't I?
Oh yeah, got your audio. I'm swore you.
It does look like our unions have formed a line. Now, I mentioned the shortages that the Confederates had, the problems the Confederates had at all times. One of the best places for them to get resource during the American Civil War is definitely the battlefield. So the battlefield is the place to get, because they're all using the same guns. I mentioned the Confederacy to finish the war with the same guns it started. And here's where a funny connection comes in. The most common single weapon of the American Civil War, the Americans like to tell you, is the Springfield rifles. But they combined two models to get that. So the Springfield 1861 and the 1863. At 700,000 each, that's 1.4 million. By model, there are 800,000 5.77 caliber Enfield rifles, all the way from a little country called England. Can anybody guess why 95% of all the gunpowder that was used during this war came from? England. I'll give you another one. The last 5% was homemade, but it was made from saltpeter that was mined from the Dutch East Indies, which was owned by England. So when people say, yeah, and here's another fact. Most of these people's great-grandparents were from England. Not only that, but the North was using immigration as a way to fuel the war. When people came, they were asked if they wanted to join the army.
He looks like he's
if they joined the army, they immediately became a citizen. If they became a citizen, they immediately get paid, got the right to vote, got the right to stay. So if you're on the docks with your man who's just arrived, missus, and somebody comes up and says, I will give you $50, then I'll give you an extra $12 a month if he goes off to war, but you get $50 straight away to start your life. Yeah, you go off with that regiment, sunshine. I'll see you later. Now the Confederates would like to capture the gun because it's something they can't manufacture. The Confederates did manufacture some cannons during the war, but they were all locked at Savannah because there was no way they could move them. So actually, the Confederates had problems with shifting things, so they couldn't actually shift things at all during the war, which was a major problem.
Thank you. I can't really see.
We're going to try and volley fire the cannon crew. Bearing in mind that we have minimised the range here so that you can actually see what's happening. I'm going to see if the cannon crew have got a reply to this. What do we reckon? Do we reckon the cannon crew have got a good reply to this?
Yes. Yeah. You okay, baby?
Firing by file means that you're firing one after the other, and the first one's reloading, which hopefully means that you've... And now look at that smoke ring still in the air.
Oh, look at that ring.
That's how much force and air was used there. And the Union infantry again advancing.
All right, come on, baby. Should we go back? Come here. Come here.
One thing I haven't perhaps mentioned is the fact that the weapons of the American Civil War are not flintlocks. You probably noticed this. You don't have to prime the pan and then go about loading all the musket ball and everything down the barrel. And in fact, they've not got musket balls at all. These have actually got bullets. And the bullets is the invention of a Frenchman. And this Frenchman, they're called Binet, invented a bullet that's too small, because a rifle bullet needs to fit down the barrel. So, if he invents a bullet that's too small, but has got a flange on it at the bottom that opens up and grips the rifling, then what happens is that he's then able to grip the rifling and essentially fire. And this means that these weapons can fire 3 times a minute, just like a smoothbore, but are in fact a rifled weapon. So the percussion caps are in fact a good thing, because the percussion cap weapons, of course, work in the rain. They also work in other adverse circumstances, which flintlock didn't like, very windy conditions. But that's not the best thing about percussion caps. And you may ask, why do we not see less percussion cap weapons these days? Why don't we hear about them? We hear about flintlocks all the time. We've seen flintlocks in every movie, Sharp Adam and all.